Very good evening to one and all. It's a beautiful evening outside, and this evening we are here all together to praise God in a particular manner. Laudato Si, mi Señor. Praise be to you, my Lord. The very opening line of Laudato Si, the encyclical of Pope Francis, quoting Saint Francis of Assisi. The JCSA and digital Jesuits welcome you all, friends and families, loved ones, my brethren from the Society of Jesus and people worldwide. We are here today to renew a call to convert ourselves with regard to our relation with nature, ecology in this COVID pandemic era. When I said, praise be to you, Lord, I say that because we have to thank and praise the Lord for the gifts that he has bestowed upon each one of us that is around us. But at times we have been irresponsible with regard to our use of those very gifts. And the recent pandemic, if we take in Fratelli tutti, the encyclical of Pope Francis, we are all called to recognize and appreciate all those around us, whether it's nature, whether it's our own brethren, with respect. We have seen how each of us are connected in a beautiful way. When one is affected, the entire clan is affected. We are here to try to understand what is our response to this call. We have esteemed panelists today with us who will be giving their own reflections on how our response should be. I call upon Dr. Father C.G. Chaco, the Eco-Jesuit Network Coordinator and the Development Director of the Conference of South Asia, to say a short prayer.
Friends, welcome you all, and thanks, Joshua. Let us have a few moments of silence, invoking the Lord, the Spirit. Lord God, one God but called in different names, especially in our context in South Asia. You are the Antaryamin, the within of all of us. You dwell in the hearts of everything. Fill the hearts of each one of us, the humanity, the whole of creation. Enlighten us as we are gathered in solidarity, as we are to recommit ourselves as children of the Mother Earth. Heal us as we encounter the many challenges emerging from the pandemic and the natural disasters. Be with our farmers who are registering their concerns, the human rights defenders who are often wrongly accused. Heal our earth from greed, from hunger, from poverty, inequalities, and discrimination. Come to listen to the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, the displaced, the dispossessed. Come to nurture every tiny atom of the whole cosmos. Instill in us a new union, a new solidarity, and renewed hope for a more sustainable and harmonious universe. May our prayer be pleasing to you. Over to you, Joshua.
Thank you, Father. I now invite the President of the Jesuit Conference of South Asia, Father Stanislaus D'Souza, who is also known as the Provincial of South Asia. Prior to this, he was the Provincial of Karnataka Jesuit Province, the Rector of St. Joseph's Institutions, Bangalore, the Director of St. Joseph's College of Business Administration, Bengaluru, the Director of St. Joseph's College of Commerce, Bengaluru, the Consultor to the Jesuit Provincial, Bengaluru. Dr. Father Stani has a master's and a PhD in Kannada from Bangalore University and Mangalore University. He has a few scholarly articles to his credit and has keen interest in environmental issues. He coordinates the activities of the Jesuit Conference of South Asia, JCSA, a body of the Jesuit provincials of South Asia. Also animates, guides, and oversees the administration of the crucial Jesuit networks and works such as the Jesuit Refugee Service, the ISI, the Indian Social Institutes, Theologates, Philosophates, all across the region, which also includes Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and India. Over to Father Jerome Stanislaus D'Souza, a short message for all of us.
Thank you, Joshua. Dear Father CG, the conference coordinator for ecology, distinguished speakers, and my dear friends, good evening. At the outset, I welcome you all for this webinar, Suffering Humanity, Laudato Si, Fratelli tutti, and our response, and wish you all a fruitful discussion, dialogue, and discernment. We have gathered here to celebrate the 6th anniversary of Laudato Si amidst an unprecedented crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Look at the people, their families, socio-political, cultural institutions, including religions. All are battered badly, and hence people have lost their lives and livelihood. When people are about to settle down, there have been attacks from various fungi, the black, the yellow, and the white. It is not only the pandemic. The humanity is ravaged by violence, terrorism, poverty, hunger, and many forms of social and economic injustices. Along with the health hazards and socio-economic issues, the other crisis that has hit people hard is the rising climate change, which has made the planet Earth uninhabitable. According to experts, if everything remains the same, sea levels would rise and extreme weather events would become commonplace. On the face of continuous miseries, people have become desperate and thus struggle to make sense out of these crises. Although these issues, health, socio-economic, and environment, look different, they are not isolated and unrelated. They are interconnected. They influence each other and consequently lead to the destruction and death of all species. At this chain of tragedy, one may surely ask, is there hope? The answer is a resounding yes. Our world is not without hope. Many say that COVID had ushered in a new way of being and doing. While undercutting irresponsible living, it has underscored the importance of the essentials of life, respect and care for creation, and promotion of fraternity among us, with others, and especially with the nature. Hence, many people of goodwill have lent a helping hand despite danger to their own lives. One such good Samaritan, a beacon of hope in the contemporary world, is Pope Francis. Through his teaching and preaching, words and deeds, he has been attempting to usher in a culture of care and concern, protection and promotion of creation. In fact, our webinar on the theme Suffering Humanity, Laudato Si, Fratelli tutti, and our response is the commemoration of his path-breaking encyclical Laudato Si. Laudato Si brought the environment to the center stage. It gave greater visibility to the interconnectedness of creation, especially the relationship between human degradation and environmental crisis, and fostered deeper solidarity to save the whole creation. It ushered in a culture of ongoing conversion within and without. It promoted positivity, emphasized renewed commitment, encouraged creative and collaborative ventures of caring for one another and the creation. On similar lines, The Fratelli tutti, another encyclical of Pope Francis, emphasize the importance of fraternity to save the creation. In other words, both encyclicals have underscored the age-old teaching to love one another. If we love, we listen to the cry of the one, of the loved one, and we care. We need to be the super spreaders of love, as it is crucial for the continuation of life. On 18th May, Pope Francis tweeted, "In order to ensure the proper care of our common home, we must become we, that is ever wider and more co-responsible, in the profound conviction that whatever good is done in our world is done for the present and future generations." My hope is that the commemoration of the Laudato Si will help us to listen to the cry of the earth and the poor, which is becoming more and more heartbreaking, and find ways to wipe the tears in the eyes of people, and especially the Mother Earth. The message from our scientists and our young people is very clear. We are destroying our future. The only way to arrest this is to love. To love someone is to ensure that the other is not lost, not destroyed. It is to build bridges or usher in a culture of reconciliation and become brothers and sisters amidst all man-made divisions based on caste and class, land and language, region and religion. In other words, we can make a difference if only we stand together, work through partnership, work the synodal path, as the Pope would say. Let us make all aware of everyone's responsibility to care for our common home. Let us be inclusive, involve people, government and civil society organizations, following an ecumenical and interreligious approach. Along with this, we need also to unleash an action-oriented program for change. We need to explore creative and concrete ways to protect and promote the creation. I'm sure we remember those 7 Laudato Si goals and draw up an action plan to realize them. Response to the cry of the earth, response to the cry of the poor, ecological economics, adoption of simple lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality, community involvement, and participatory action. I wish all success for the deliberation. May it be a discernment in common to usher in a better world as the Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti envision. I thank Father CG for organizing this webinar, and you, the participants, for being valuable partners in the common mission of bettering the world and the creation. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father Stani. On behalf of JCSA and Digital Jesuits, our response today evening is we are bringing to you right at the comfort at your homes on Zoom. We're having 3 esteemed panelists, those who have got large experience with regard to social justice and also with regard to the environment. But to channelize all of this in order to guide our ship on this beautiful evening, we have our moderator, Dr. Luke Mendes, the very energetic, dynamic person. Dr. Luke Mendes is from Mumbai, and he has completed his double master's Arts and Humanities, also cinema, from the New York State University. He has completed his PhD in environmental science, the co-author of book Our Response to Climate Emergency in Continuum Laudato Si. He is the faculty at Xavier Institute of Communication, Mumbai, and the founder of a Fish Eye School hosted at St. Xavier's Institute of Engineering, Mahim. We are glad to have him in order to anchor and in order to navigate our ship this evening. and we cannot find a better person in order to do this. But before I welcome him, a kind request to all our participants out here. If you have any question, kindly put it down in the chat box. Put it down in the chat box. Our technical team will take a note of it and forward it to Dr. Luke Mendes as we have the question and answer session at the end. And if time doesn't permit us, then we shall also take your questions. So kindly do send us an email to JCSA or Digital Jesuits. The technical team will put down the email IDs of both JCSA and Digital Jesuits, and we shall forward your questions to the panelists. Over to Dr. Luke Mendes.
Hi, good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, distinguished panelists, webinar team. Thank you for your presence, and I request you basically to keep a notebook at the side while we're deliberating each presentation. So I would like to set a kind of a baselining over here. We're going to discuss two encyclicals by Pope Francis. One is Laudato Si and one is Fratelli tutti, which talks about fraternity and brotherhood. Laudato Si talks about the environment and our consciousness with it. And we're here to deliberate these two topics, these two encyclical letters by His Holiness Pope Francis. I'd like to start off by first introducing Dr. Orla O'Reilly Hazra. She'll be our first speaker. Dr. Orla Hazra has completed her PhD from the Department of Religion and Religious Education at the Fordham University, New York, a Jesuit university. Since locating from Princeton, New Jersey to Mumbai in 2008, she has been affiliated with the Times of India Foundation, the Nalanda World Wisdom Center, and Tarumitra, which means Friends of Trees, in Bihar, St. Xavier's, Bihar, in India, and were in close collaboration with the Jesuits in Mumbai. Her interest is to foster an eco-spirituality and responsible life practice based on awakening and awareness of the integrity of creation. Postmodern conversation. Focusing on eco-spirituality, she conducted workshops for women, presenting our emerging epic narrative, a common universe creation story, in conversation with various religious texts. She is also a visiting consultant at the Holy Cross Maitreya, a center for eco-justice, Bangalore. She is teaming up with Dr. Meet Conlon from Australia to give series of workshops on the universe story of Dr. Thomas Barry in Bangalore from next month. Dr. Orla addressed different province assemblies of congregation on the connection and disconnection our generation has been experiencing from the earth. Dr. Orla has a larger plan to get connected and revitalize a global eco-network. I right now invite Dr. Orla to take the floor, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen now. Hey, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm not in Mumbai now. I'm actually in Sarasota, Florida, where I've been since 2019, and I can't get back because I'm on a tourist visa. So hopefully I'll get my OCI card because my husband is from Calcutta. Hopefully I'll get that, and then I'll be able to come back to India and resume a lot of the work that I was doing. So I just want to thank the Jesuits. My father was shaped by the Jesuits, and it was relatively later on in my life that I kind of got a glimpse of what the Jesuit pedagogy was and the charisma. And so I'm very grateful for having had an overall framework to put my imagination into, and also to put my findings into. So, and I would also like to thank Father Robert Athakal and Father Prashanta Lalakar for our continued work down through the years. So I'm just going to talk really just, suffering in general. I'm not going to split out humanity and earth because we're one substance. And I'm going to focus on fostering a collective memory. The poet Octavio Paz, Nobel laureate and Mexican ambassador to India, said, "The preservation of the collective memory by a group, even a small one, is a true tablet of salvation for the entire community. It is by means of such tablets that traditions and cultures across the seas of time." So the slide will start with this a quote from Octavio Paz. And the preservation of the collective memory by a group, even a small one, is a true tablet of salvation for the entire community. It is by means of such tablets that traditions and cultures cross the seas of time. And I've chosen this because Octavio Paz, a Nobel laureate, he was the Mexican ambassador to India from 1962 and 1968, and he quit in 1968. He quit the whole State Department in protest of what Mexico was doing to the student revolt in Mexico at that time. And so we look back at our collective communities, let's say our religious traditions, and when there's a shift, let's say from Hinduism to Buddhism or from Judaism to Christianity, we can see that the leaders were pointing to something, a collective, to remind their communities a way home. So the next slide, Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti, each address our culture of denial, of being a collective. And I've chosen this particular vision, the elephant, because I have training as an addictions counselor. And the elephant in the room in families with addiction is always kind of sitting there. So we always kind of fuse, what's the elephant in the room? So I'm going to say the elephant in our room today is our cosmology of separation. So in the next slide, Rabindranath Tagore also pointed that in his books and plays and poetry. And one particular book, Creative Unity, he points out the distinction. In our realization of the truth, we put our emphasis either upon the principle of dualism or upon the principle of unity. And we heard just a little bit earlier in the opening comments that Earth is a we. We are all the earth. There's nothing separate. We came out of the earth. So we have a spell now, the next slide, of separation. The collective sense is traumatically oppressed. And Laudato Si would say our social and environmental issues are not separate. They are one issue and one of a worldview and assumptions. Again, our cosmology. And very often we have myths of separation and return. And so the painting there is an Irish myth. My parents were from Ireland, of the children of Lear. And the children of Lear are cast out into, they're shape-shifting into swans. And they have a promise of when the spell will be broken, when they hear the freedom bell. So we'll come back to them in a little bit. So may we consider ourselves children of Lear. So in the next slide, the separation now has caused our alienation, our social injustices, and our environmental unsustainability. And so we've had, habits of consumption. We've had our environmental destruction. Then we've had COVID. Then we've had, over in India, you've had your issues, which are also somewhat aligned with our issues, with racial justice and women's issues, police violence, oppression. So the COVID virus kind of came out of our activities, but it's also lifting a veil on our interconnection, both physically with the virus coming out of Earth and also with one another. And in the next slide, Vandana Shiva gives us a quote. And she says, "Science is informing us that as we invade forest ecosystems, destroy homes of species, and manipulate plants and animals for profits, we create conditions for new diseases. Over the past 50 years, 300 new pathogens have emerged. It is well documented in the next slide that around 70% of human pathogens, including HIV, Ebola, influenza, MERS, and SARS, emerge when forest ecosystems are invaded and viruses jump from animals to humans. When animals are cramped in factory farms for profit maximization, new diseases like swine flu and bird flu spread. So we have ourselves going into these forests, upsetting the people that are already living there, migration, etc. And then on top of that, we have disease. So in the next slide, it's very well known that indigenous people have a sense of the integrity of creation. And this theologian, he's Native American for the Osage Nation, George Tinker, he was upset with the theologians when they added integrity of creation onto the justice and peace. So justice, peace, integrity of creation. He said, no, it should be integrity of creation first. Understanding the integrity of creation will then most naturally include other individuals and communities of human beings, and justice and then peace will flow out of our concern for one another and all of creation. So we need a metanoia. We've spoken about that already. We need an internal conversion. So on the left, we have the human focused. We look at that and say hierarchy. Hierarchy is holy order. It's not, hierarchy is a name behind our cosmology. So how can we get a different cosmology, which is interconnected? So a holy order that we already are actually in, but we don't recognize. So my interest is in education. That's my focus. That's my lens in relation to these two documents. So we have, unfortunately, we have a type of schooling that separates, is based on this separate way of thinking. And so again, Tagore pointed this out, thinking back to empire. The Raja poked its body, this is in the parrot's training, poked its body with his finger, the little parrot was being trained. Only its inner stuffing of book leaves rustled. So the spirit was oppressed. And the focus is on rationality, autonomy, competition, objectivity, analysis, progression, and self-development. And our President Biden gave a speech recently talking about, his new goals. And he used, I think he used the word compete probably 40 times. And so now they want to start children in schools earlier. So I'm just thinking, how can we contradict this stream? And then in the next slide is a drawing from one of the students in the course that Prashant and I taught at the Department of Interreligious Studies. And she was interested in my research on healing the body-mind-cosmos split, and about a particular work that I had read, a thesis a woman had wrote, "Where's my body when my mind's in class? Where is it?" So anyway, I asked her to draw a painting, and you can see this is way before COVID. And you have the little bodies hanging over on the side and, disconnected, the mind-body split. There it is. So in the next slide, we have learning facts without a context means they don't have anything to connect to. They just float away. So that's what we're faced with. We say we have child-centered education. We have child-focused education. We don't center our children anywhere. So that's what we're up against. So next slide, Thomas Berry, who was inspired by Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin, said, in other words, we need to move the trend to the larger context of things, to place the human within a larger context. And next, it's all a question of story. We're in between stories. The old story, the amount of how the world came to be and how we fit into it isn't working properly. We need to learn a new story. The old myths don't work anymore. And he also suggested a spell-breaking awakening, a fourfold wisdom conversation. In the next slide, we have the wisdom of science, the wisdom of women, the wisdom of the indigenous people and the wisdom of religion. And so Prashant and I teamed up at the DIRS to have an honors course, and the students called it Awaken to Cosmic Compassion. So this was our approach to heal and foster this metanoia, this conversion. And it was based on the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, which is context, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation. And usually when we say context, we think it's an issue. We say, oh, global warming, that's our context, or, migrant workers, that's the context. But that's really our experience, reflecting on our experience. So we're missing a huge piece by not going back to our fundamental context. Next slide. So the languages of collective memory, kind of fostering understanding, you have the academic, which is more the logical information, putting subjects in conversation with each other. And then you have that's logos. Then you have the therapeutic, the mythos. So under that, you have arts, music, dance, drama, ritual, story, and mind-body connection. Then on the other side, you have homiletic, which is the language of love. And that's, we need to do something. So that's Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti. But until we get this healing first on the other side, until we have a faith in the integrity of creation, the homily isn't going to work. So next slide. So what is our collective history? What is it? And what is science showing to us? And how can we bring our people home? So first you have the universe begins 13.7 billion years ago. And in these academic silos, physics is, all these are in separate silos. But if you teach it in one course, a condensed version, the students get a sense of a story. The stars come in, chemical elements, 13.5 billion years, plants and earth, 4.5, life, biology, 3.8 billion years. Notice it's almost 9 billion years until earth comes together, and then 4 billion years then for earth's life, anthropology, archaeology, and then history. So these are thresholds. And of course, now we're at the next threshold. The Cenozoic era is ending as we know it. So how can we move into what some people are calling the Ecozoic era? How can we live as one, the earth as a we? Next slide. We focused on our fraternity, on our sorority. So when we talk about fraternity, that's interrelationship. And our sorority, our intersistership. And we spoke about our journey out of Africa, so that we know that we're all cousins in some form. That, just because we have a different skin color doesn't mean that we're not from the same story. Next slide. So experiencing our cosmic walk. So the cosmic walk is you'll see the students gathered around it, and we usually do that at the end of either a semester or even at the end of a retreat. And so it's 140 feet of rope with 10 billion years to section off. So where all the lights at the end are that's kind of where we are at the very end on the right-hand side. And then where the young woman is with the black t-shirt, that's really where Earth has come together. Okay, so all of that spiraling, that 9 billion years, it took for the chemicals to come together, which are actually the patterns of our bones and water, etc. So in the next slide, an abridged version of this whole story. Brian Swim would say, Earth was once molten lava and now sings opera. So for the Indian context, we can say Earth was once molten lava and now plays tabla. So that movement from lava, I'm always blown away whenever I look at lava and I think, gosh, we came out of that. We came out of the stars. Next slide. So the wisdom of the mystics in all religious traditions globally say that separation is an illusion, that all is one, integrity of creation, and Vasudev Kutumbakam. So the next slide, Brian Swim again kind of summarizes the creation story unfurling within the scientific enterprise. It's a wonderful quote and really something to meditate on. Provides the fundamental context, the fundamental arena of meaning for all the peoples of the earth. For the first time in human history, we can agree on a basic stories of the galaxies, the stars, the planets, minerals, life forms, and human cultures. This story does not diminish the spiritual traditions of the classical or tribal periods of human history. Rather, this story provides the proper setting for the teachings of all the traditions, showing the true magnitude of their central truth. So once again, it puts them in an overall container that we come out of. Next slide. So back then to the Jesuit pedagogy. We've got our context. So now reflecting, what is that? Reflecting and experiencing. One of our students said, we are such an amazing and significant part of this universe, evolving together with all the species and forces of nature. I am Mother Earth and Mother Earth is me. Knowing this cosmos has been the first step towards unraveling the purpose of my life. This was Shweta. And the next slide, we think of these values that we were fostering before, competition and autonomy, that were crushing the spirit. Here we have reverence. And I love how it's the like religion. Religare means to bind. So reverence, responsibility, respect, restraint, redistribution, and renewal. So reverence, a sense of reverence and wonder and awe ensures our ability to respond to our global issues in life practice. And this was at a teacher workshop in Pune, JDV, and we were putting Rocky on one another. And then one of the teachers leapt forward and placed her Rocky on the plant that had been in the middle. Next slide. So now we're back to the elephant again. So here we are outside, kind of diagnosing and naming all of our issues. And then we move inside the elephant, now that we're integral. So the integral action, next slide, going back to the Ignatian pedagogy, what would that be? So all human educational institutions, our educational institutions are not just schools. And Fratelli tutti acknowledges that is the responsibility. First responsibility is the family. So our family, school, work, and recreation, we're teaching each other all day long, must now be judged primarily to the extent to which they inhibit, ignore, or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. So the next slide, reminding of the Fratelli tutti, I would like especially to mention solidarity, which as a moral virtue and social attitude born of personal conversion, calls for commitment on the part of those responsible for education and formation. So once again, back to that action of how do we ignore, inhibit, or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. And by human earth, I mean earth as a total. So my human mango tree, my human husband, it's human, the earth is as a total. So a bunch of us who are kind of grounded in the story have been linking up all over the world. And we went to, next slide, we went to the World Union of Jesuit Alumni and presented IPP in the context of an evolutionary universe. And another one that we went to and presented IPP in an evolutionary universe was the International Big History Association in Villanova. So in those pictures, you'll see some Jesuits that you know. And in the lower corner, in the left photograph, there's a woman on the right, Jennifer Morgan, who started the Deep Time Network, which I'll explain to you about. And another man in the top photograph, you have Jose Mesa, and you have Barry Rodrigue, and he's now at Symbiosis University in Pune. And I'll tell you about that. So next slide. So the Deep Time Network is an organization that was founded, and I've been developing the curriculum framework, and it's based on IPP. We're just naming it different things. It's a context, and then matrix for experience, reflection, interiority, and then action, and then continuity, then continuum, then is the last component. And it takes in all the various lineages of people teaching the story. You know, you have the universe story, you have the big history people, you have systems theory, and Maria Montessori, who came up with cosmic education many years ago, and that kind of got off track, but now they're bringing it back. And we have courses online. We just finished one. One was called the New Cosmology, and then second one was on applying the new cosmology. So that was action. And the next one, we're going to be looking at leadership. And we have scholarships, and it would be really great to get more people from Asia, because Robert Apical was gave last week was the last presentation, and so he was giving insights on his work with Tara Mitra, and it's very powerful, the freedom and creativity coming from Asia and other ways of knowing that we don't kind of consider. You know, we can cross-fertilize one another. So the next slide is a conference coming up just down your alley in Pune, and it's a big history conference. Symbiosis has taken their mission statement, Vasudev Kutumbakam, to they're really applying it now, and every student has to take big history. So their conference is Changing the World: Community Science and Engagement with big history. So how do we address our issues in action? Okay, next slide. So the Garden of Remembrance is in Ireland, and how can we consider the earth as our garden? You wondered what happened to the children of Lear. Well, they heard the freedom bell, and they came back to earth. So that's the conclusion. I'm sorry, I can't read the vision, but it was, we saw a vision and set it adrift. So it's generations of the vision. So I invite us all to embrace the vision of our collective community and keep doing the work that needs to be done. And I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hazra. Sorry, we have to keep a check of time. And excellent presentation. We've just to summarize, you've touched upon disease, the upcoming disease, the indigenous context, the indigenous people's context, education and awareness in nature consciousness, and a real need for an awakening, including science, women, indigenous people. And yes, the homily will not work unless we are transformed from within. And yes, so thank you again, Dr. Hazra. And also, Dr. Hazra, just to give you an anecdote, we at St. Xavier's in Bombay, we started the conscientization for the students in the year 2016. And in St. Xavier's, Odisha, Bhubaneswar, we also have from 2016, under the mentorship of Father Paul, the sustainability management program, the MBA in sustainability management program. So really interesting things happening in the Xavier's, bouquet of education. And in Mahim too, in St. Xavier's Technical and Engineering College under Father John Rose, we have Nature Consciousness, Diploma, Arts and Humanities, and Green Entrepreneurship Program. So, we've already started these things, and St. Xavier's is actually, I think we're leading the way, in the sense. In XIC, we started in 2013, 2 years before the Laudato Si came out. So, yeah. So now thank you again for your time, and it was a great presentation. I'd like to give a little brief introduce Father Cedric Prakash, who's our next speaker. Father Cedric Prakash is a Jesuit. He's a well-known human rights, reconciliation, and peace activist with a focus on advocacy. Also a prolific writer on subjects related to justice, peace, environment, contextual spirituality, and the Constitution of India. On 2nd October 2001, birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, he founded Prashant, the Ahmedabad-based Jesuit Center for Human Rights, Justice and Peace. He was the director till 2016 in January. For the 3 years, 2016 to 2018, Father Prakash was based in Beirut, Lebanon, in the regional office of the Jesuit Refugee Service, Middle East and North Africa region. As the regional advocacy and communications officer or advisor, working with refugees and internally displaced persons, IDPs, in Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon. In collaboration with St. Joseph's University, Beirut, he headed in September and 2018, completed a path-breaking research study, Journeying Together. It was titled Journeying Together, on the situation of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon. In October 1988, Father Prakash, on behalf of the Jesuit Social Justice and Ecological Secretariat, Rome, was responsible for organizing the first ever International Jesuit Convention on Appropriate Technology. The convention held in Gujarat brought together Jesuit environmentalists and social scientists from all over the world to deliberate and formulate an action plan as a response to ecological degradation. He was also part of the Indian NGO delegation to the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, also known as the Earth Summit, held in Brazil in June 1992. Today, he is involved with several networks and campaigns working on issues related to environmental justice. He is currently engaged in advocacy work related to Father Stan Swami and other human rights defenders incarcerated under the UAPA and other draconian laws. For his work in advocacy, human rights, justice, environment, communal harmony and peace, Father Prakash is a recipient of several national and international awards. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Father Cedric Prakash. Take over the floor, please.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, the Jesuit Conference of South Asia, the Eco-Jesuits here, Father Stani Posa, Father CG, the whole team working within the digital Jesuits. For me, it's both an honor and a privilege to be with you this evening at this very important webinar, which has brought together over 500 people from not merely from India, but from all parts of the world. Just heard a very elaborate and excellent presentation by our dear friend Orla, whom I know from the last several years. And Orla definitely situated the whole, the meaning of today's interaction, of today's webinar. To begin this sharing, the brief time I have, I do not have a PowerPoint like Orla does, and as Father Lancy would do after this. There is Laudato Si and there is Fratelli tutti. We are basing our documents on this. In number 26 of Laudato Si, Pope Francis very clearly says, many of those who possess more resources and economic or political power seem mostly to be concerned with masking the problems or concealing their symptoms, simply making efforts to reduce some of the negative impacts of climate change. However, many of these symptoms indicate that such effects will continue to worsen if we continue with the current models of production and consumption. He goes on further, number 144 and number 146. There is a need to respect the rights of peoples and cultures and to appreciate that the development of social group presupposes an historical process which takes place within a cultural context from within their proper culture. It is essential to show special care for indigenous communities and their cultural traditions. For them, land is not a commodity, but rather a gift from God. But there are agricultural or mining projects which are undertaken without regard for the degradation of nature and climate. Then here in Fratelli tutti, from number 273 to 276, he gives us a plan of action. He says in number 273, the root of modern totalitarianism is to be found in the denial of the transcendent dignity of the human person, who, as the visible image of the invisible God, is therefore by his very nature the subject of rights that no one may violate. And then he calls in the response for a very concrete action. Friends, at this moment, I would like each one of you to join me in a moment of silence, praying very specially for our brother Stan Swami, who all these years has epitomized Fratelli tutti and Laudato Si. And today, he's there in the Holy Family Hospital, thank God for the efforts of many, but in a very serious health condition. Let's spend a moment of prayer. Be with him, Lord. Heal him from his infirmities and his illness. Thank you. So I would like to situate what I want to share. I come from a background of activism. We need every sphere of human life, but I would like and challenge why we are saying that from after spending 1 year in Laudato Si, after 6 years, now we need to have a plan of action. Didn't we have a plan of action all this time? What were we doing? So the Pope, when he gave us that video presentation on the 24th of May, when Cardinal Turkson gave that big press conference, he very, very clearly reiterated the fact that we were not doing enough. 6 years ago, when Pope Francis came out with this encyclical, Laudato Si, he had the highest ratings in the United States for any world leader, of that contemporary world of 6 years ago. They loved him, they praised him. 3 months after the encyclical, by August, September, his ratings plummeted, rock bottom. He was no longer popular. Because of the simple reason, if you look at Laudato Si, as they said in the press conference, that in Bangladesh they grew 800,000 trees. Jesuits, St. Ignatius would tell us, are not meant only for that. It's good to grow trees. But at the press conference, no one talked about Bangladesh being battered and brutalized by global warming and climate change. And Pope Francis in Laudato Si says that global warming, climate change is not merely something God made, but he said it is man-made. It is because of overconsumption. Look at the seven dimensions he gives us in terms of the action plan, which our Posa Father Stanley referred to in his inaugural address. He's very, very clear. So both these documents make a tremendous paradigm shift, demand a radical change, not merely in our own lifestyles, but the ability and the courage to play a prophetic role in our world today. Nothing less than that. to be visible and vocal. And I think here, St. Ignatius would like us to make an examination of conscience. And if you're honest, as a Society of Jesus, in this Ignatian year, there should be this conversion that we are talking about. How do we respond to suffering humanity in the time of the pandemic? A lot of the people incarcerated, the Bhima Koregaon 16 and the conspiracy case, were those who identified themselves with the rights of the poor and the marginalized, those who were denied their rights, as Pope Francis speaks about, those who were denied their resources, those who were denied their jal, jungle, and jameen. Stan Lutswamy, I know him from the early 70s when I went for a training under him as a layperson from St. Xavier's College, Bombay. I was a student at that time, and he was a young priest there in the ISI, just for a temporary period of time. With the others, he conducted a social awareness analysis program. And over the years, he left the comfort of that social institute and went to live with the Adivasis. He struggled with them. And because of his struggle, he had to take up the most powerful people in that area of Jharkhand. People who were looting, who were destroying the natural resources that Pope Francis speaks about, which rightly belongs to the tribals, the Jal, Jungle, and Jameen. Part of the corporate sector, the mining mafia, the timber merchants. Let's pay attention to a related document, that synodal document after the synod on the Amazon, Querida Amazonia. Pope Francis is not talking about let's love the environment, let's celebrate the environment. He says, no. Those who are looting it, those who are plundering it, should be brought to book. And part of our examination of conscience in terms of a paradigm shift is to ask ourselves, whom do we identify ourselves with? Who are our biggest donors everywhere? We talk about having Jesuits, about colleges and universities of excellence. But what is Pope Francis talking about, both in Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti? And that, I think, has to be a clear message for us if we are going to embark not merely on a Laudato Si week, but on a 7-year plan. In this Ignatian year, we are called for a conversion, and perhaps we need a cannonball to be able to make us realize that we as a Society of Jesus, we as men and women of goodwill, we as collaborators need to get out of our comfort zone, need to transcend our projects, need to transcend, our fears. What are we afraid of? Pope Francis says. And he didn't care about his ratings falling down. He didn't care. And he has taken on the powerful, those who hoard up resources. In both the documents, he speaks about the arms and ammunition industry. He refers to that. Those who encourage war. In these documents, if you're talking about suffering humanity, I think we do need to have a band-aid approach. I'm in no quarrel about that. We need to grow trees. We need to use less plastic and all that. We need to have, all these nice things. Alternative technology. We spoke about this in 1988, Jesuits, and we came out with a strong statement. But the point is, after that, we don't have continuity. We don't have monitoring to ensure change. And that is why perhaps Pope Francis says, now at least give ourselves 7 years. 7 years is enough? Not at all. In order to ensure change, we would need a lifetime. And we need, as Pope St. Ignatius reminds us, to be converted all the time. That's why every Jesuit is called to make an examination of conscience, not once a day, but twice a day, and perhaps more. And if we talk about this conversion in the context of the title, Ecological Conversion, we cannot talk about ecological conversion if we are not going to address issues of ecological environmental injustice. There are lots of groups. Now, for example, in the last few months, since the pandemic has begun, the government of India has auctioned coal blocks. They have destroyed the Aravalli range. They have destroyed the Western Ghats. They have the Lakshadweep. There was a whole campaign to give it to the corporate sector. And where were we as eco-Jesuits in each of these campaigns? Whom are we networking with? And one of the things we are constantly called to is to collaborate with all men and women of goodwill. We need to conduct social awareness programs, as Stan was doing years ago. But we also need to do much more than that. There is another point which I would like to make is we lost one of the greatest environmentalists of India, Sundarlal Bahuguna, the father of the Chipko movement. When people were coming to destroy the trees, he got people to go and embrace the trees. It's not about growing trees, but to prevent cutting. We have the Central Vista program going on in Delhi, where thousands of trees, which have taken years to grow, are just demolished. There are hundreds of thousands of civil society protesting against it. They have gone to court and so on. That is environment. That is part of our campaign. That is part of our journey towards giving our children, as Pope Francis reminds us in this new video, and he has reminded us right at the beginning, 6 years ago on Pentecost Sunday, what is the world we would like to leave for our children. I would like to end with 3 very clear points. And that is, first of all, we need to internalize both Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti. These are not cosmetic documents. These are hard. These are talking about endemic issues. When he speaks about the parable of the Good Samaritan, when we were children, we all loved to dramatize them in our catechism class and so on, that parable of the Good Samaritan. But in his exposition in Fratelli tutti, he says you have to look at something which is systemic. It's not only what the man does, but something more. He's sitting out at an unjust system. We need to internalize it. We need to make it part of our catechesis. So many of our good Catholics, lay Catholics, know nothing about this. Because we priests, we holy sisters, I see many of them here, and I also see some bishops, okay, have not made this part of our catechesis. And we need to ask ourselves, why? Why are we afraid to preach it in our Sunday sermons, to catechize our people? Our people do not know anything about it. Okay, it is good that some people know. There is some articles coming out in our Catholic magazines, but do we share it with our non-Catholic brethren? Some of them, I'm happy are here. You know, do we work together with them in the building up of a more just, humane, and equitable society? That is the second in terms of collaboration. And the third is in terms of response is for me is very, very clear. And Pope Francis says it all the time in his both his documents. He says we have 7 years. We have finished 6 years. We have another 7 years. And the last year is to praise and thank God. Fine, we need to praise God. But in order to make these years meaningful, we all need to take a stand for the environment, for suffering humanity. We cannot take a stand, as Jesus would say, you know, by putting our light under a bushel. We have to be visible and vocal. And for that, we have to pay the price. It's not an easy thing for an 83-year-old man like Stan Swami to be languishing in Taloja jail for more than 8 months. And some of them, like Arun Ferreira, who studied in St. Xavier's College, Bombay, and whose uncle is a bishop in Bombay, or Vernon Gonsalves, who studied in my school in Baikala, Antonio D'Souza. Okay, they have been committed to people. They have been committed to the rights, and they have been visible and vocal. I've just come out from a PUCL meeting and we have another one after this. And we are wondering what more we can be doing as civil society. So we need to be visible and vocal. And I would like to end this sharing with you with that beautiful prayer which Pope Francis says at the end of his Fratelli tutti. It's a prayer to the Creator. And I would invite each one of you to join me in praying that prayer. Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Father Prakash, for your insights and your presentation on the two books. Just to summarize what Father Prakash had said, Father Prakash focused on the extractive industries and protecting our natural ecosystem, which are our trees and forests. Also, a key point in Father Prakash's presentation was he questions the Jesuits working together, on eco campaigns with such a vast network. Why, and with such a vast network and the ability to put pressure, why aren't the entire Jesuit community coming together using national and international forums? So again, one more point to add to Father Prakash's presentation is our consumption patterns. Each mobile phone, it takes so much of the earth to extract those rare earths that are found in the earth. And with our use and throw patterns, we are in fact adding to the extractive industry, and those extractive industries cause huge wounds on the surface of Mother Earth. And whether it's for fossil fuels and other, other elements that we use in our day-to-day lives. Thank you for the Prakash again. I'd like to next introduce. I'd also like to tell the audiences to please keep a notebook or a pen and paper to write down your questions directed to a particular panelist, and we would take your questions post in between towards the closing of the session. I'd like to introduce now Father Lancelot D'Souza. Father Lancelot D'Souza is a principal of St. Xavier's Autonomous College, Ahmedabad. He is also the head and associate professor, Department of Botany, with a doctorate in ethnobotany and a member of the Indian Botanical Society and a fellow of the Society of Ethnobotanists. He is the founder of a network called Adi Aushadhi. Adi is first, Aushadhi is medicine, that consists of tribal medicinal practitioners involved in cultivation and marketing of their medicinal produce in collaboration with NGOs in the region. Presently, Dr. Lancy is serving as a principal investigator for CSR projects and projects of Ayush involving Adi Aushadhi, or first medicine. He is also coordinating the Gujarat Jesuit Ecology Mission, the GJEM, an ecology project for the Gujarat Jesuits and collaborators involving eco-spirituality, eco-education, eco-alternatives, and traditional medicine. He has several publications in national journals, authored and co-authored several books, and has presented papers at several national and international conferences and workshops. He has also been associated with Taru Mitra. Taru Mitra is the 30-odd-year-old institution at St. Xavier's, Bihar. The environmental network for a long and also coordinated an education plus leadership development program for Adivasi and Dalit students with CRS, Catholic Relief Services. Coordinating a program with the International Center for Research on Women, ICRW, entitled Piloting Curriculum for Stigma Reduction in Higher Education, got featured in the GUNI International Conference on Transformative Education at Barcelona, Spain. This happened in May 2013. And also at the ICAAP 11, the International Conference on HIV/AIDS of the Asia Pacific held at Bangkok. Dr. Lancy, being an environmentalist, has been living an entire conscientious life. I'd like to invite Dr. Lancy to take the floor, please.
So, good evening, everybody. We are all aware of the problem that we face in terms of poverty, in terms of people, and in terms of the environment. And you're going to see a few of these tribal drawings, and you'll understand why. It's part of the way I think we approach the problem in the GJEM in our interaction with the tribal or the Adivasi community. The next slide. So Fratelli tutti and Laudato Si, if I were to summarize them in just 3 words each, Fratelli tutti would tell us that everyone is connected, everyone. And in a world that is fragmented, as Pope Francis would say, dark clouds hanging over it, a little before the pandemic started, that's when he wrote it, everyone is connected. And 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, before Fratelli tutti, you have Laudato Si telling us that everything is interconnected. Now, it is this spirit and this understanding of interconnectedness that we have tried to keep at the back of our minds in the Gujarat Jesuit, in the Ecological Mission, the GJEM. And it is a small, simple, humble attempt to try to to get the spirit of these encyclicals, especially Laudato Si, which is the older one, into action in our own context. The next slide. Fratelli tutti, I think, I like doing this sometimes to articles as a science person. You get an idea of what is important really in an article from the number of times something appears. So good Catholics, please note, baptism doesn't come even once, confirmation, none of the sacraments come even once, Eucharist also. But migrants, strangers, then reconciliation, forgiveness, there is hope. And fraternity, justice, peace 103 times in the encyclical. And human, the basic human family living in connected with us. Orla told us, our history of 13.7 billion years, which we cannot forget and we cannot separate ourselves from. So these are, I think, gives us an idea of what are the basic themes of Fratelli tutti. Yes, when we talk about eco-conversion, next slide. When we talk about an eco-conversion, I think all the speakers have spoken about that, Laudato Si 152. It's a call, it's a summons to an interior conversion. So it's not about something that just happens outside us, but it's a call to an interior change and an interior conversion. And this we have tried to do, as the next slide will show, through several programs, which some we have designed and some we have picked up. We have eco-retreats, several of them which have been given to fathers, sisters, 6 days, 8 days, depending on the requirement. A large number of you, I think, who are here today have been for them, several of you. For lay people, 6-8 days is a bit too long, so 2 days or 3 days, you have shorter ones. Then we have an artist, Jyoti Xavier, who's part of the JGM team, and therefore we have a lot of art which expresses some of the deepest sentiments of the human integrated into this approach. And I think that's very, very interesting and very, very important, and Ola touched on it. We have the Eco Magis program basically dealing with the youth. And then a number of programs for the youth, we'll come to this later. That's a group of people which I think are really keen on doing something for the environment and who can very easily be moved by what's happening to the environment. We help them to understand it a little better. We have been inspired in all this by Father Robert Atikal and his team, Sister Mudita, I can see her there, the entire team of Taru Mitra and Father Rapai and myself trained there, and I think that has helped us a lot in Gujarat. So that's part of being the Jesuit family, I think, learning from each other and spreading the learning. Next slide. multi-pronged strategies that have been used to get across our approach. So films that are made, you have them on the website, you have competitions that are there. Taromitra Patna has a very large number of competitions involving a lot of school children, motivational and awareness film, other resource material. So Taromitra Patna has a number of these materials which are prepared, exhibitions. So these are all ways. I think it's important that the message be proclaimed and that the message be made clear to people. Next. We had a competition last year, the next slide, on the occasion of Laudato Si. And if you go to the next slide, you'll have, there were school kids, there were youth, and then the next slide, you will see the winner. So it's about encouraging people to read the documents, and people are not going to pick up a book of 240 pages and read it. So there has to be a way in which this is done, a creative way in which this is done. The next slide, as I said, a very important target group for us to work with is the youth. And this is now part of the Gujarat Province Strategic Action Plan as well. We've organized in the last few weeks, even during COVID time, about 6 one-day recollections. Jyoti Xavier, who heads our eco education team, and his Green the Blue Trust, they have been involved in designing these workshops and organizing these workshops. Environment is a theme around which youth come very easily. And you'll see in the next slide, one of the programs they had a small island off the coast. There you can see the island below, off the coast of Khambat. A virgin island, if you would say that. As yet, I don't think anybody has got there too. There are few people living there. And they shot a beautiful movie in Gujarati. We're talking about now putting a lot of these texts into the Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti, into the vernacular language, because that is important. A movie being shot, Father Vinayak there posing before the camera. We've also had a number of another initiative, interesting initiative, which we did during the pandemic. The next slide, when people were walking back home and people did not have anything to eat. A group of artists, a group of tribal artists, Warli artists from Talasri. One thing is you give them a kit and you give them food and they have food for a day. But in negotiating with them and dialoguing with them, one of the things we thought of is, why don't we help them to produce paintings? So by giving them some help in order to get the material and then giving them a small amount of money per day, they produce paintings related to Laudato Si. So we selected some of these themes and gave them the quotations. And the next slide, the 9 artists. So their paintings are with us, and we've just set up a type of exhibition hall at Sevasi, which we are going to use for environmental education. And these paintings will be part of that hall. So a creative initiative, again, we are dealing with people, and we are dealing with the situation that is created because of the pandemic. So small experiments which I think can make us think and can make us try things out. The next slide, another important area, we move to a sustainable lifestyle. Ecological conversion needs to bring a lasting change, and is also a community conversion. So how do we live? We Jesuits, we religious, we live as communities. And how does this impact not only the way I personally think, but how does this impact the group in which I live? The next slide, we know the problem. Laudato Si talks about it at length. The throwaway culture in which we live, that, Luke was just referring to the fact that, the mobiles which we use and we buy new ones, every year or every 2 years, and the impact that it has on the environment, and then the impact that it has on the fact that it's thrown away. One of the big problems being caused now is these masks that we wear because of COVID, and they are settling at the bottom of the ocean, and you have pictures of seabirds and other animals with their feet trapped in these things and their bodies floating in the ocean. Real difficulties that we don't think of, but things that are happening just because of our our willingness to throw away things and to live as part of this throwaway culture. A number of solar alternatives. The next slide. These have been basically grounded in the Xavier Technical Institute in Sevasi, where Father Vincent Munu was the director. He's for the next few days, he's transferred. Working with all types of solar systems, looking for alternatives. And XTI itself has a course for solar technicians. They research new technologies which come into the market. They try them, then they recommend them for various of our institution. And then, another very important thing is to provide services for repair and for maintenance. So this is something which we were doing through I've been doing through the GJEM and under the leadership of Father Vincent Munu. The next slide will talk about the eco audit. Is there a way by which we can sensitize ourselves, our communities, to our lifestyle, the way we are living? And basically you see there in the center, we've taken 5 areas: water, waste, energy, biodiversity, and food. And we've designed a very simple eco audit. The next slide would show you, I think, the sheet on energy. So very simple things. As a community, you would say yes or no, and then you would rate the percentage on each of these 5 areas. There's one slide of this for each of the areas. And then you would have in the next slide, you will see a type of a score sheet, which will give you a score. So this is a simple way basically to sensitize ourselves to the way we are living and the possible impact that it is having on the environment. So there's a lot of interest. This is going to be done by all Jesuit institutions in Gujarat over the next 3 years as part of our strategic action plan. We move to another area in which we have tried to intervene, and that is agriculture. The next slide. Laudato Si would talk about the farmer as the minister, not the minister of home affairs or whatever, but as the minister, the priest in the temple of creation, the steward. And if we go to the next slide, I think our dealing with farmers has touches important areas. The whole issue of land, which is linked to their bodies and linked to their lives. The whole issue of the next slide, the whole issue of water, tribal painting of water, rainwater harvesting. So the whole issue of water. And these are issues which are very, very intricately related to the earth and to the environment and to people. And therefore our solutions need to be solutions that touch these 3 areas. Next. We have the whole, Laudato Si refers to the indigenous people, of having special care for indigenous communities and their cultural traditions. And this is an important area which we have worked. I have been fortunate to have done my PhD in ethnobotany. The next slide. And we have the tribals, the area where I did my PhD, where I began 25 years ago, is actually the area which was carved out as a sanctuary because of the Narmada Dam. So because the Narmada Dam went up, and at that time, some of our Jesuit fathers were fighting, but very often we don't succeed. But what happens to the people who are left behind? How do they fend for themselves? So 94 villages within that Shurbaneshwar sanctuary. And here were people, rich knowledge of plants, rich knowledge of traditional medicine, living extremely poor lives. And initial attempts to get them together, we were helped by the government, by the Gujarat Ecology Commission, the Xavier Research Foundation, Father Vincent Briganza, I think, is there, and getting them to bind themselves into a group. Initially, we worked as self-help groups. Now we have 2 farmer-producer organizations. So you need an organization in order to liaison with the government and to get funding from the government and from other agencies to produce their own traditional medicine. This will give a benefit to them, to the entire community, and well, to the entire mankind as well. So you're dealing basically with areas of the medicines. When you're talking about cultivating medicinal plants, you automatically have to deal with water because they don't have water after 6 months. You have to deal with improving their land because if they don't have water and they don't have land, then they were migrating. when they couldn't migrate because they had to come back because of the pandemic. So these are attempts to address these issues taken together. The health, so the health of people, as we said, and the other important health issue is the health of the land. Very, very, very crucial, because the land is being poisoned. Laudato Si refers to that. We've taken up organic farming in our own way. It's important first to help people to understand and to take interest in Laudato farming. And we've actually succeeded in Mandal in South Gujarat to get 25 tribal people the organic certificate from the APIDA, which is the official national body for certifying organic farming. Now, this has been a very hard work that has been done by Mr. Francis McWan and his team from Srishti Organics. And they have gone one step further. Srishti Organics has now been nominated as one of the agencies to certify farmers for organic farming in Gujarat. So we are hoping that we can help n number of poorer farmers in order to get this, because then you can access a lot of further grants from the government. This is about the health of the land. In all this, I think the women are in the forefront, and we have a number of women's groups with which we are linked up with. You have the group of with Sister Lizzie in Unai, the Sister Vandana in Narukot. You have other groups which we have been working, and Adi Aushadhi has moved on to a lot of value addition, producing biscuits, producing cake, producing oil, tea powder, which have got these medicinal properties. And we even have patent, we even have applied for a patent on Mauda ice cream. So there is an entire team that is working in Dediapada, as I said, part of the Shulpaneshwar sanctuary. The next slide. So the kitchen gardens are schemes by which people can grow their own food. They can choose what they want to grow, and they can choose what they want to eat, and it is healthy, it is nutritious, and there are several schemes by which people can get fruit trees, they can get seeds, they can get medicinal plants from the government. In the next slide is another thing that we attempted, and that is of creating what are called the biodiversity monitoring communities, the BMCs. So we created 46 BMCs. These are official government approved bodies which will document, according to India's national law, which will document the biodiversity of the entire panchayat. So in the entire Dediapada Taluka, the biodiversity has been documented. This is crucial because if somebody is trying to come in, an industry or somebody else is coming in, you have a documented proof that, maybe some rare varieties of plants or some things were there before that. And that is important, installing some of these things which may come up later. Just now we have a project from Ayush, that's the government of India, for strengthening 12 of these BMCs. So they are actually doing medicinal plant cultivation. They are actually in 4 villages. They are actually producing, they have set up big nurseries where they are growing medicinal plants. And keep in mind, by doing all this, they are going to get about 6 lakhs in wages. So they don't need to migrate, they don't need to go out, they are staying back in the village, they are growing plants which they will be using later on, and they will be getting income, be able to make income out of it. So a number of areas, a number of farms in the province have been taken up. Jesuits have been convinced, and they are trying to make them into organic farms. It is need to show people, to demonstrate to them. A small farmer cannot take a risk. He needs to see that something will work before he puts his money into it. So this is something that is going on. Next. So we have the whole issue of mining, which Father Cedric referred to, and in Goa, and there are vast protests in Molam and several other places against the harbour, against the railway line, not part of the JGM, but I think Jesuits involved in issues of that type. Next. You have the whole issue of climate change and the cyclones which are there now, but we'll go to the next slide. And the last area is the whole area of eco-education, one of the strengths of the JGM, and one of the things that plays a very important role in ecological sensitization and eco-conversion. Yes, you can go ahead a little faster. We have basically, Yes, next we have basically three main programs. One is what we call the LEAF program. So you can see the LEAF program in 2 schools in 2014. This was before Laudato Si. You have 8 schools now, and these are eight session programs conducted on holidays, well designed by Jyoti Xavier and his team, the eco-education team. The second type of program, the next one that we have, so this is the LEAF program, pictures of them involving school kids. The second is a one-day training program, which is the environment awareness program, because we could not take up so many schools. And the third, we have a program for teachers. I think that's very important because teachers play a very important role. Students come and go, but teachers remain for several years. So that is the Green Teachers program. As I said, we're just setting up. It's going to be inaugurated on the 5th of June. This exhibition in the Xavier Technical Institute, where we will be able to utilize it for education, eco-education. The last 2 slides, next. Yeah, so Laudato Si 111 speaks about a distinctive way of seeing things. Okay, we've already jumped that. I think Father Stan and Father Cedric also referred to the 7 goals of Laudato Si there, several of them lifestyles. And I think this is a beautiful quote from Fratelli tutti. Pope Francis speaks about renewed hope. Renewed hope. Hope is bold. It can look beyond. We shouldn't limit our horizon, and it can open us up to grand ideals, and therefore let us continue to advance along the paths of hope. What we do, we have to do together. Thank you very much, Jesuits, and thanks to this, what we have presented is the work of a large number of people who are connected with the Gujarat Jesuit Ecology Mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Lancy, for this vast array of work that you're doing in Gujarat. It would be nice that all the states connect on this. So basically what we would like to have is like a small kind of a conclusion from each speaker, in case they've missed something out, say in about 30 seconds each. And I will summarize this post that. Yeah. So if you could start with Dr. Hazra. Some small concluding statement in 30 seconds.
For the moment. Yeah, integral cosmology, foster a faith in the integrity of creation, and act accordingly. I would just say, to try and figure out a way, not just to talk about the environment, to teach the universe story so your students understand where they come from, have a sense of reverence for themselves, Earth and their brother and their sister, and then to act accordingly, the faith in the integrity of creation and a life practice accordingly.
Thank you, Dr. Hazra. Can we move on to Father Cedric, please? Any closing statements from your side? Father Cedric?
Yeah, so basically, I want to say 3 things. One is humanity is suffering. Secondly, in the context of this webinar, and the context of the pandemic, we need to respond. Beginning with Evangelii Gaudium, in his first year of pontificate, he has given us 2 clear directions. That is Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti. We as Jesuits, as church, as civil society, we need to network, we need to collaborate, we have to get outside our church compound and institutions. Because one of the 7-year plans is to have community participation. Environmental, ecological work needs to be done in the midst of people, just as Father Stan Swami has been doing all these years and has had to pay to the price. And if and when we are visible and vocal, if we literally take a stand about those who are degrading the environment, then we will have to pay the price. Are we ready for that or not?
Thank you, Father Prakash. I'd like Father Lancy to conclude if there's a small remark that he'd like to make.
I think the task is so big and the task is so gigantic that there is need for as many people and for everybody of all diverse thinking, for everybody to sort of put their hand to the plow, for us to realize, how I am contributing to it and how we are contributing to it, and what I can do to try to do my little bit like the widow did. But I think there is need for all of us to try to do things because the problem is so big.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Lancy. Now, to summarize what has been happening today, the discussion was on Laudato Si and Fratelli tutti, two encyclicals written by His Holy Father, Pope Francis. All the presentations from this webinar will be available to all. And like Father Cedric was saying, we need to get out. I would like to just remind our participants as well as our panelists that there was a French Jesuit, Father Henry de Laudernany, in Madagascar in 1983 started the rice intensive program, which India is using. They call it the rice intensive program. That's to get a good yield of rice when you separate them in 10 inches apart from each other so the roots grow. That is for food security. So he was actually, like Pope Francis also said, you need to smell like your sheep. And he is a great example of it, the French Jesuit Father Henry. And today India is using the rice intensive through the government of India, but they're not mentioning Father Henry's name, and that is pretty surprising. But I'd like to give credit to all the Jesuits who have been working on the environmental front. Father Robert Attical, even the diocesan priests and bishops like Cardinal Oswald Gracious. He started the Green Diocese program in Bombay. And I myself personally have trained 56 dioceses and also the Asian bishops I have trained personally on eco-conscientization and eco-consciousness. So Bishop Alvin De Silva has been an integral part. Father Joe Gonsalves, Deepika and her team, even Father Simon and Father Lancy Pinto at St. Michael's Church have integrated. I am part of that panel. The Brahmins, the Muslims, and now we are also getting the Sikhs to work together because this is our common home. It doesn't only give us the responsibility to take the lead. We should take a collective whole and approach this holistically. So we're working together, and the environment is a common tool. In fact, it's a common meeting place for varied thoughts and processes to unite. And yes, like Father Seiji is saying, we've run out of time, and I'd like to thank all the participants and all the panelists for giving us your valuable time. Yes, may we do more for Mother Earth. And the indigenous also has been doing a lot. I myself being indigenous to the 7 islands of Bombay, we have our totem called the fig tree, the umber tree. So there are a lot of things that has been happening. I think we should go back to our roots, our culture, where we were frugal, and we talk about motherland. Let us focus on that. And with this note, we need to empathize in our hearts for every creature, not only for the human ecosystem, for the bugs, the bees, everybody. And equal rights for all creatures on this planet. So I'd like to thank you all for attending. There's a lot more to say. Maybe we'll do more webinars and have how-to and trainings also. And thank you for your time. And I'd like to say, have a good evening. Have a good evening. Yes?
Joshua, yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Joshua.
So I'd like to thank all the panelists and especially the anchor, Dr. Luke Mendes, for wonderfully putting together the entire program for all of us. On last note, we would like to thank XUB-XIM for providing us this platform, Zoom link for all of us so that we could come together and share our views and reflect. And now it's time to go out there and do some action. Good night, everyone, and God bless.
Action.
Thanks, Orla, Father Lancy, Dr. Luke, Joshua, Joshi, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Father Posa, and everyone. Thanks, Cedric. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Luke, bye.
Thank you.
Yes.